Today is the 4th of June, 2022. Thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel. Additionally, like my official YouTube videos and share my official links to my official YouTube videos. In conjunction to that, make sure to go to my website, www.susanmealing.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. So I'm going to begin with, for those who know, what would be the similarities to my scuba diving colors, as well as my what is supposed to be considered adult lifestyle colors. Now, for those who don't know, remember I had began my time in what is supposed to be considered the adult consenting lifestyle in the year of 2004 into the year of 2005, before my hairstyle was this way and hair color to a degree this way, as well as my tattoos. And so then there's the factors of 2009 when my hairstyle being this way and my hair color is not to the preference, the need, the want, or anything else. And that particular factor at this point in time, if I could actually get what I actually needed to do so, that would be great. However, for the minimum standard that I have for myself. Anyway, nonetheless, that particular factor would be similar to, while some people may not have known because I didn't have tools back then, in the year of 2004 to 2005, in the year of 2009, when I earned my scuba diving certifications, all 26 of them, that had to do with the same colors that people would know about in the supposed to be consenting adult lifestyle in the years of 2009 into 2010, 2011, 2012, though in specific, I had decided upon those colors in the year of 2004 into 2005, despite not having gotten any tools by that point in time. So for those who don't know, my colors are black and white. Now, the reason why I chose the colors black and white are multifaceted. It doesn't just have to do with one or two reasons, although I suppose it's a smidgen befitting when you take into consideration those factors regarding what in the armed forces of the United States of America those particular colors refer to, as far as one particular flag. In regards of spirituality, those colors are very well known more often in Eastern religions. And while there are Native American religions that do have certain factors as to black and white, that's more in latter times as to what the references are. And so there are a multitude of factors as to why I chose the colors of black and white, despite the after effects of my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. Some people may not have known because of certain other situations as to how deep I've always thought. And even though some people may not have known as to my childhood and my teenage years, such as the fact as my biological mother, her mother, or my maternal grandmother, was a part of the Eastern Star and the Rosicrucians. And so in a guesstimation, there might be some individuals who may have had a misunderstanding in regards of my creative only in the writing regarding fiction genre of Failsafe, that particular book series. Now, anybody who has certain studies in their background that I may have met, whether before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000 and or after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, they may not have known if they spoke with my biological mother and or my biological father and or my biological sister and or Old Tenet Presbyterian Church congregants, who they could find at the time, and or Asher Holmes Elementary School, Marlboro Middle School, St. John Vianney High School, Crystal Lake South High School, and the Army, and or Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment, even though I didn't get to attend despite my invitation. And that would probably only be those particular individuals compared to different people throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City that I grew up spending time with. Most likely, certain extended family to my biological mother, biological father, the 2 different sides of the family, because you wouldn't find the last name through my maiden enlisted last name at all. So in certain similarities, how I go by Susan Mi Ling, that's actually how you would find, if you could, the extended family to my biological father's side of the family. And seeing how Lee is a very common last name, finding a first generation Chinese female at all, or just any Chinese female, if she kept her maiden last name, would be difficult. However, since my biological father's sister had not kept her maiden last name, and I wouldn't actually know officially what the married last name would be, it would be extremely difficult to find my biological father's sister, her husband, and my cousin Catherine, which in turn would be difficult to find my great aunt Helen, which would have her surname as to whatever family she had married into. That would be my grandmama and my grandpapa, which is my cousin Jade's grandparents, as to her biological father's last name, which I wouldn't remember. And so in those capacities of my studies, yes, in religious studies, the majority that would be capable to be found on paper would be Old Tenet Presbyterian Church and St. John Vianney High School. However, those who know about the Eastern Star and the Rosicrucians, especially somebody such as my maternal grandmother, who had been involved with them in the early 1900s. There might not be that electronic record the same way in that capacity. However, there's a lot of studies within the Eastern Star, and additionally her knowing the author Dion Fortune in those references. And so, while some, similarly to since my updates in my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, from the year of 2019 onward, so this is the 4th of June 2022, as I brought up in my original updates, the confusion that I could pick up energetically in reference to the possibility of some people thinking that they may have had certain factors involved with what is a fiction book series because of my personal background. Then there's my Bakgong and my Bakpu and my Bak Gung being Cantonese and my Buk Pu being half Cantonese and half Mandarin, there are those factors as to different studies and work. So while, yes, on pieces of paper, the only knowledge would be in reference to whatever pieces of paper could be found. However, since my Buk Gung passed away in the year of 1993, or 1994, I'm not certain, my grandpa Gavit passed away around that time as well, there wouldn't be individuals to specifically speak with other than my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister, as well as my biological mother's side of the family in comparison. However, she had been married twice, and then there's the other factors that her half-siblings would have my grandpa Gavit's maiden last name in comparison to my biological mother's maiden last name. So if you didn't know that beforehand, especially before my updates to my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmealing.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com, well, you'd be similar to my biological little sister because you wouldn't know that, because she's 4 years younger than me. And so unless she were to have gotten that information beforehand from my biological mother and my biological father before my updates to my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, through my website, www.susanmealing, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com, beginning in the year of 2019 compared to the starting point in the year of 2014 or 2015, you wouldn't really have that background or that knowledge, or where to start until the year of 2019 when I began my updates. And so, because of, in reference to my fact-based books, such as Finding a Silver Lining and Finding the Silver Lining, those situations to my fiction-based books of The Paroxysm of the Lotus, as well as Failsafe, the Kennedy Curse fused with science fiction fantasy. Those two books most specifically, in conjunction, yes, to the Curious Children book series, I suppose is an irony, would lead possibly to that misunderstanding that first and foremost, even though in the title of Failsafe, there's the science fiction part, and so there's that. However, if there were any similarities, such as the name regarding Kennedy, which where I was born and raised, there were a lot of signs all over the place. Street signs, airport signs, buildings, so on and so forth in the tri-state area that have the name Kennedy. And that's just in those areas. That's not including anywhere else. That's just that in comparison. So then the hypothetical of other people thinking, possibly, or assuming that their particular involvement in my life, whichever point in time or wherever, would have to do with any characters, descriptions, or any factors of. So in regards of Failsafe, well, if you didn't know before my updates to my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, through my website, www.susanmealing.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com, as to those particulars, as to those updates in the year of 2019 onward, you probably would possibly, if I'm accurate as to energetically picking up on certain things, possibly think that you were somehow, such as the reference to an individual that I had dated at one point in time, that I didn't even remember his last name until I think the year of 2020, some point in time in that point. So maybe 2019-ish, though maybe you'd have to look at the modern day book in my books section through the link to Amazon to purchase that, to then read that. Either that or I put it in my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, through my website, www.susanmealing.com. So if individuals that didn't have any, or maybe later after Failsafe had been published, as far as my book, not having known that I had certain studies, despite having discussed with people in person, face-to-face in person. I was in the San Antonio pagan community in the year 2004 and 2005, on and off throughout the rest of the years in the state of Texas, which does include 2019 and or 2020. There are the factors of those studies beforehand, and similarly to my grandpa Gavitt and my buck Gug and my buck Pooh and my babysitter and her husband, Sunny Sonia and Joe Jose, as well as other people such as the rabbis who would attend Old Tenet Presbyterian Church and would have dialogue with the various children and congregants and would discuss situations, and if they had a spouse that was with them, their spouses as well, which most likely may not be on pieces of paper in that factor. Those additional individuals, such as yantas and yaddies and other people's parents or family or friends that were visiting in town during the time frame of different school performances, such as band performances or plays in school, whichever location, possibly track meets, so on and so forth, wouldn't be known through paper. And so if there was that thought process as to anybody at all, then there's those factors, especially if during the year when I was going through confirmation class, as far as Old Tenet Presbyterian Church, which, if you know, Old Tenet Presbyterian Church, the colors are black and white. The building is white and the roof is black. More importantly, though, General George Washington's office is white and the roof is black. That's the most important part, is General George Washington's private office is white and the roof is black. So while yes, I learned much, and then there's Pastor Mackenzie, and his normal robe was black with the white collar. Then there's the references to the original pastor of Old Tenet Presbyterian Church and that basement cellar situation, and that too, his robe was black, and instead of the white collar that Pastor Mackenzie had, he had kind of a fluffy, lacy something another for his, I don't know what it would be called, though I'm sure there are those who know what that terminology would be to that type of attire. And so there's a few situations to take in consideration as to, in addition, that where I was born and raised, so there's Fort Monmouth, and of course New Jersey would be the state, similarly to making the joke as to General George Washington's private office, which is also his private latrine, sort of, because only New Jersey would New Jerseyans would always find that funny. Similarly, New Jersey has Fort Dix, and doesn't matter how many years old you are, it's always going to be funny. And so you're always going to laugh like a child as far as that's concerned, because it's New Jersey, and New Jersey has a certain je ne sais quoi when it comes to personality traits if you push to a certain level. And so sometimes the only way to describe someone, whatever gender, it's similar to how in New Jersey, especially during the 1980s and 1990s, and even before then, though I wasn't alive at that time, the term guys, it's a gender neutral term. So, doesn't matter whether you're a biological female or a biological male, the term dick sometimes just is a little bit more befitting, despite being a biological female. Sometimes it's just, it just happens to be that way. I can make a joke in certain references, so those who know what cherries are in a different capacity. And so, there's a little bit of a spearheading regarding that. And so I can always make a joke. And so it is as it is. Nonetheless, during that time frame, especially of my confirmation class, which was a year long, that situation as to the additional studies, because I took my confirmation very seriously. I had been, and still am, thankful that I, despite being temper tantrumy about attending Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment situation, I am grateful that I could attend St. John Vianney High School because of the religion classes, as well as, I suppose, a different type of immersion, pun intended, when it comes to scuba diving, because that's how you go scuba diving. And so, so I was capable to have that, and since there were a multitude of individuals with multiple spiritual backgrounds as to their parents, there was also that. And then what the students were studying in addition, especially because in comparison to myself, they were allowed to watch movies and television shows that I wasn't allowed to watch as a child, because even when I was in high school, my biological parents were that way. And if you've met my biological mother and or my biological father, you would know that it wasn't ever worth it to try to sneak to watch a television show or movie that was above a G rating, because of those introductions to certain locations, such as walls and floors. And then certain objects such as wooden spoons and coat hangers that were from the 1980s, and some earlier dry cleaners, and or introductions to electrical cords and other cords of those time frames, because my biological mother had worked at Prudential doing information technology engineering software design. And anybody who knows anything about information technology, you kind of need the hardware. So yes, that would be very hard from the years of the 1980s and 1990s. A very different type of material as far as the craftsmanship as to those particular types of cords. Though, there is the term thick-skinned, and so, that is as it is. So, it just wasn't worth it to try to watch certain shows and then the knowledge that at some point it would be discussed in some way, as people have learned with more pop culture aspects. So where my biological sister would bring up certain pop culture references, of that time that I wouldn't have had, and I didn't have, because she went over certain people's houses and so on and so forth, just because I was older biologically. And then there were those situations during those time frames. So here's a little bit of an irony. So when my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister moved from Illinois to Texas in the year 2003, my biological father and my biological sister drove the, I don't know if it was a Mercury Sable or a similar looking car, from Illinois to Texas, and that length of a trip. Now, for those, as to an irony of ironies, so my biological mother's name is Anna. Look at the letter, okay, as far as the first letter, and then there's my biological father, Mike, and then my biological little sister, Patricia. Now, when she was younger, she went by Patty. If she was in trouble, she was called Patricia, and so, or Patricia Ann. So you have that as well. So for those who know, in the year of 2012 especially, there was a household that had a guy named Mike and a guy named Alan, not Ann or Anna though, and then Patty. And there was a maroon Mercury Sable. I don't know whose vehicle that was, though during a point in time in reference to an airport photo shoot, there was a similar style of vehicle that was in the area. And so in that reference as to after my scuba diving in the year 2009, despite how many attempts I made in person, face-to-face in person, in comparison to other factors after that in the year 2010. So in 2009, from essentially the end of June all the way to my trip that I had went to go on regarding my Florida scuba diving, I had spoken with people out of concern, because not only, but mainly because of an individual who caught a poofy fish, knowing that everybody had had a deeper scuba dive than they ever had before. And it was because of my work. And not because of necessarily, they were allowed to go deeper and survive that because of me, because well, it is technically Atlantic area of the water-ish in the Gulf of Mexico as to how that current is. And I had stuff to take care of in that vicinity. And so I had made attempts, and in comparison, when I was volunteering at International, instead of it being taken seriously, it was more along the lines of, well, you know, the poofy fish situation, well, that's another school, so, you know, and it didn't matter to me. I personally, and it was known, I didn't personally have any sensation of comfort going to that particular shop because of my first experience. When in reference to after the Florida trip, I had made an attempt, I think it was in October, because I wanted to go to the flower mounds because I was really concerned about something that I had picked up energetically. And Patty at International refused to book a trip there for me. And I was infuriated because I knew that I needed to get out there and I needed to go to the flower mounds. So instead, it took a lot for me to do because of how uncomfortable I had been to what I had dealt with my first time and only time at that point. And then in addition to that particular situation, I had to take care of it and make a genuine attempt. So when I went out there, I did. There was a second time I had walked into Scuba Toys, and because of my own what have you, I made an attempt to ask about the flower mound trip. However, because of certain wording at that point in time, and I had guesstimated that in reference to the situation before, it was just not an option. And so because of the way that went, I made the only attempts that I could make at that time to go out there a second time to deal with the situation that I knew was a problem. And because I couldn't actually explain it in the civilian sector, it wasn't something I could just go to a military installation and be like, hey, you guys, which one of you are ready to, because I couldn't do that. There wasn't that capacity. So I made the attempts, and because of the way situations were, in comparison to what would have been better, those factors went the way they did. And so I made the genuine attempts, despite the situations as to my first time walking into Scuba Toys, which the initial aspect was, well, whose account are you going to be on? I'm not going to be on anybody's account. It's my own account. It's my own work. What would that ever have to do? And so the individual that I had spoken with at my first trip out there had been as to that level of machismo that I had already dealt with when I was a child and a teenager in New Jersey. I wasn't willing to deal with that, especially when it came to my education as to my scuba diving certifications and all of the stuff that I knew I was needing to take care of. Not just in reference to, as I had explained, not just in reference to my headaches and migraines, having explained that I was born and raised in New Jersey, I grew up going out to the New Jersey shoreline each and every summer throughout my childhood. And so unlike certain factors that some might wish in regards of my fact-based books, as far as the 3-volume book series, The Adventures of Susan Meeling's Scuba Diver Extraordinaire, I couldn't go into that because of Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment as to the interview process regarding the second interview that I had after my equivalent of an ASVAB and essays, so on and so forth. Because those who know about Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment, or MAST for short, certain things you can't discuss, even though those who understand. It's a specific situation, especially with clearance and backgrounds. And so it's very difficult, especially being a biological female who didn't graduate basic training, though for the Army. And so this sort of similarity aspects of during those time frames, and because I didn't want to go through any other schools because I didn't know and I didn't have the sensation of comfort, especially with what I was going to have to deal with in conjunction to what I literally had just dealt with, not even 3 months prior, referencing the Vandenberg scuba dive as to that individual, as well as the way certain situations went in regards of my cavern scuba diving certification. I refused to take that risk because the risk was not going to change the outcome, because I already saw which way it would have gone if I had went with any other school other than those two. So if I had went with another school or shop, I know that I would have dealt with the situations in reference to the Vandenberg scuba dive, where I would have been paired with someone who was inadept and incapable of doing anything as to the situations regarding once dropped into the water. Then I would have had to deal with the similar situations regarding the Vandenberg scuba dive, that whenever I would surface after dropping, I deal with the same thing in reference to that particular individual. In conjunction to that, I knew that what I dealt with on the boat ride out from Key West, Florida, out to where the Vandenberg was sunken, I would deal with that as far as the staff members, because I physically looked as I physically do. And so those particular annoyances in a multitude of factors, to actually have to needlessly relive the same sorts of situations in a different capacity, not just in reference to auto mechanic work, not just in reference to scientific work, not just in reference to technology work, not just in reference to woodworking and carpentry, not just in reference to arithmetic, not just in reference to one or two more or a handful. It was just inevitable that that was going to be that way. And there was no way that I could take my son and my daughter to my ex-in-laws for that particular situation. And even if I could have, by that point in time, which I would have had to drive all the way from Carrollton, Texas to White Settlement, Texas, back to Carrollton, Texas, down to the Corpus Christi area, and then deal with all the other stuff as far as that's concerned, to then make it back in time to go drive all the way back to Carrollton, Texas, and drop off my gear, to then go over to White Settlement and or Fort Worth, Texas, to then pick up my son and my daughter, to then go back to Carrollton, Texas. That just wasn't viable of an option. Not that it was even a possibility anyway, because by the time that occurred, I had to deal with McCoy Elementary School as far as those particular situations and their failures, because their assumptions as to whatever they view scuba diving as in comparison to my actual work, because of the earlier year of 2009 and them thinking as to their arrogance and haughtiness and ignorance in that hypothetical, because I physically look as I do back then in the year of 2009, 2008 in Carrollton, Texas. And so, you know, those particular types of assumptions, well, you know how to spell assume when you break it down. You know, who was I capable to actually speak with about that at all, when in reference to the individual who caught a poofy fish, would it actually be serious during those points in time when it was actually mandatory for him to actually be serious because he wanted to do things his way in comparison to what actually would have made sense? And so instead of, ironically, they're called instructors, instead of following actual instructions, because I wasn't a scuba dive instructor, I had earned 26 scuba diving certifications, or 25 scuba diving certifications during that time frame. However, I didn't have the title of scuba diving instructor. Yeah, no, I had the equivalent of far more, especially with my prior work as to my childhood and my teenage years, and having been invited to Marine and Science Technology School. The irony of ironies, those who have seen that CIA Dad show as to when Stan goes into the civilian sector and every attempt Stan goes and makes to actually discuss with anybody, all of a sudden they just, disappear. That's pretty much during the time frame of my scuba diving. Yeah. Not just then, Afterwards. Yeah, because there's the facts as to the Fort Worth Zoo in that situation. And it's not as though I ever spoke about my work with my son or my daughter as far as my actual in-depth work, pun intended. I only talked about my certifications in comparison to my actual work. And so in comparison to anybody having common sense, because if you had common sense, you would know that there's only one person to ask. And so, yes, I went on a date with one individual who said he was in the Navy, and apparently he thought with one particular date, all of a sudden he knew everything when he knew nothing at all. I'm going to guesstimate in the comparison as to the larger aspects, pun intended, I suppose, with Fort Dix, as to other situations. So in comparison to what actually would have been assistive, which would require, actual honesty in comparison, and then actual discussions where I was actually asked questions in genuine truth. In addition to that, in a location that actually would have been considered secure in comparison to a random open area such as a restaurant, and looking as I physically do. I mean, and or any supposed to be consenting adult lifestyle location, anybody who would have actual common sense and intelligence, pun intended, would know better than to ask questions like that, as far as in-depth, pun intended, in an area with a bunch of others around that wouldn't have any clearance to those factors or any clearances at all. And so it's an irony regarding Mike, Alan, and Patty as to Mike, my biological father's name. Alan, well, you got Anne in reference to my biological little sister's middle name, and or my biological mother without the A. And then, if I can make the joke because Anne, and so if you take certain letters out of the name Alan, you have that. And then you have the reference of Patty, my biological little sister, but then Patty Stewart in regards of international. And so again, instead of common sense of just asking in honesty, because why would that ever make sense to do so? Unless the hypothetical joke I more recently have thought about as to a scuba cord or a scuba unicorn, unattached female to any male scuba diver gets involved with scuba diving, and it's all in but total not known sort of aspects, for lack of better words. And then with the military background and stuff like that, and common sense would dictate to be truthful in comparison. And then, my British military depth gauge 3 or 4-in-1 computer that I had purchased from International, as I was informed, and it was a Sunto, which I have a specific certification just to work with that particular type of scuba diving depth gauge. And so it had the compass built in, the PSI built in, the depth level built in, the timer built in. I guess that's 4. And then there was something else. I can't remember what else, but it was about 12 inches long. I know I was born and raised in New Jersey, and there's Fort Dix. However, that's a whole other ball of wax. It's not the same, although I suppose I can joke in reference to what I saw in regards to I didn't sit on, I was afraid of it. Because I wanted to be capable to sit on a stool and not slide down because of lack of traction. I may have delivered 2 children. That doesn't change anything at all. I have certain requirements, and that is as it is. So it's about, this is so bad, but it is what it is. It's about 3 inches wide and about 3.5 inches deep to that 12 inches long. So bad of a joke, and yet it's still the truth nonetheless. So and since there was a point in time in the year of 2012, for those who remember, in the San Antonio community regarding the supposed to be consenting adult lifestyle, the day or the afternoon we were moving that big pile of dirt around, Steve and Mike were talking, and it was after my U-Haul situation. So FetLife as that, and I've posted it through my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, as to that particular posting on FetLife initially, but on my website, www.susankneeling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com, and it's only in reference to my posting in comparison to any comments from others. So, that's my right to do so. And so, in comparison to some of the other stuff I dealt with, hypothetically. And so, in that particular reference of doing so, about the time frame about when I had gotten my photo albums that I didn't get to have digitized to actually have for myself at that point in time, because of the situations as to how my son and I wound up in Washington State after the Stony LaRue concert in March of 2013 at Cowboys Dance Hall in San Antonio, Texas. And that whole description, though I put in writing, I also mainly explained after I had put it in writing, because when I was in the first area of Washington State, there really wasn't anybody to speak with because of the situations at the time that I was dealing with. And so, it's been a little busy, my entire life. And so, but I don't know if there's any reference point as to those particular factors, because not only do you have Mike and Steve, then you have additionally the Dominant Mentor program in Austin, where I began, and then the Dominant Mentor program in Dallas, where I had graduated. So there's 4 people and or their spouses to make 8 people, as far as that's concerned, and or adding my biological mother and biological father, biological little sister, and her abomination of a marriage regarding the, in my opinion, whore of abominations with mother of whore of abominations for the wedding of abominations, regarding that Miller factor as far as my personal opinion. And so if my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister had actually told those people the truth in comparison, well, you do have these updates to my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, through my website, www.susankneeling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com, which would go and give additional explanations as to whether or not they actually cared about me and actually cared about my best interests, not their best interests, my best interests, instead of. So then there's those factors, because, I physically look as I do, though I'm a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, especially when it comes to those last 3 letters regarding Democrat, as far as a New Jersey term, East Coast term, or certain areas of certain what have you's term, as far as those last 3 letters to Democrat. Yeah, I know. I was kind of mulling around certain things earlier, and so I know that I've been to a lot of demos and classes, especially in the reference to the year of 2004 into the year of 2005 regarding what's supposed to be the consenting adult lifestyle. as well as multiple classes and demos in the years of 2009 into 2010. And then obviously during the year of my Dominant Mentor program where I graduated, I've obviously been to a lot of demos and classes. However, I didn't think about how demo classes and then how those three little words for, then the three little letters for Democrat. And so I'm a Republican though. And so, however you particularly view that in that particular reference, and the proof would be in regards of I didn't use any names that I had been informed of in any official capacity, whether in reference to what some people may have thought in comparison to just being creative with stuff I had known and learned before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000 regarding different names or words. Like for example, who learns about a word such as the or of or a in their childhood? So when you take in consideration, my maternal grandmother had not only been a part of the Eastern Star, knew the author Dion Fortune, and had been a part of the Rosicrucians, and in conjunction to that, had actually attended and graduated seminary school with her doctorate degree. What ever could I learn of any particular words that hypothetically some may have thought, if I am accurate, I'd have to reread my book that I authored and published, Failsafe, in comparison to what hypothetical assumptions. Because if other people were that selfish or vain in those hypotheticals compared to ever possibly thinking that there ever could be, I don't know, someone I could have spoken with, such as my maternal grandmother, a pastor or priest somewhere in all of the, my biological mother was a deacon and my biological father was a trustee, so what could there be? Then, the rabbis. And where would there ever be a Yanta or Yadi in the New Jersey area? Not forgetting, always remembering, of course, New York City, New York State, and then, where could there ever be a Yanta or Yadi in Pennsylvania ever? And then is there any possibility that there could have been Native Americans somewhere in the state of New Jersey? It is one of the original 13 colonies, and maybe there were some historical factors as to some Native Americans, not just in New Jersey, maybe there were some in New York State. Possibly. I don't want to assume there could have been some in Pennsylvania too, or throughout the United States of America. That could be a thing. And then what libraries, as to any colleges, would ever have any words in any books? Other than every book pretty much usually has a couple of words. However, those college universities, what type of library would Rutgers University have? What type of library would Princeton have? What type of library could Penn State have? Brown University, maybe they have a library. Possibly Harvard could have a library somewhere. I don't want to assume, because I did have a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. And I do deal with headaches and migraines, though more importantly, I do deal with memory deficits and cognitive disorders. And I went from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to second grade math. Maybe, just maybe, somebody who attended any one of those colleges at any point in time, maybe they visited, I don't know. And so the possibility, oh, and then there's the seminary school, my maternal grandmother, my biological mother's mother, you know, what type of library could be there that could have any books whatsoever, you know, and what words would ever be in those books. And that's not forgetting Marlboro Public Library. That's also not forgetting any school library, such as Asher Holmes Elementary School, Marlboro Middle School, you know, and then I don't know if everybody's ever heard of this store called Borders. That would be a location that could have a book or two. I don't want to assume, even though it was called a bookstore. And then maybe somebody's heard of Barnes and Nobles. I don't know if anybody knows this or not. Barnes and Nobles kind of has a couple of books here and there. You know, it's kind of a thing. Kind of similar to how Amazon kind of is on the internet. So it's kind of, you know, it's sarcasm, joke, and yet still the truth. So, you know, kind of similar to how Amazon has a few different categories of sections, not necessarily books, though different sections, hypothetically, there could be a book or two that could have been in any of those locations. I don't want to assume, because then there's the New York City Public Library and the different boroughs stuff. And so, you know, the hypothetical as to, and then maybe, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this thing called the newspaper. And so sometimes what happens with the newspaper is there are articles. I know that I was made fun of because I had to explain comics because I didn't understand why other people were talking about comic books. I was like, what do you mean comic books? I thought that, you know, and so then because I am the type of person I was, so then I found books that had the comics from the Sunday newspaper, and so that was and is the type of dork that I am. And so then, you know, because that anybody who's ever, you can just think about that. So for all those people who are like, I know how people are from New Jersey, if you do, in that capacity, just think, when people told me about comic books and I had to explain Sunday comics, and then I was like, well, we need to go to the library so that way I can get a book as far so I can say, yeah, then, you know, so for those who understand that, yeah, and and then so, you know, for an example, there was a guy named Ian, and he was into some comic or something. Maybe it was a cartoon called The Simpsons or something. I don't know what it is. No offense to people who are into it. I don't really know what it is. And so there's that. And so I was totally so non-impressive but I thought I was. And so... So, you know, I thought I'd be totally cool. And so I brought in The Far Side because I was like, yeah, I got a comic book. And so he was drawing in his notebook, and he's like, or on his notebook, I can George Carlin that. And he was like, what, you got a comic book? And so then, because I would have to do it that way, you know, I don't know how other people regarding, I know how people are from New Jersey. So I got, for those who know what the Far Side books are, I thought I was so cool. And so I walked in, I was like, oh yeah, Ian, I got a comic book. And he was like, okay, whatever, what type of comic book? And he lists off a bunch of stuff, and I'm like, no, 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 no. And so in my thoughts, I'm going over the Sunday comics because obviously a miscommunication on that. And so then it was, ugh, go in my backpack and which then just think of what the Far Side book would have been, was a hardcover, and so hit him directly in the chest too, and he's, that's the type of comic book, look, it's comic book, and yeah, no. I thought I was totally so cool, so impressive, and yet I wasn't. And so I remember he had looked at it and he's like, what is this? It's like, it's a comic book. And he's like, no, it is not a comic book. Yes, it is. It's so totally a comic book. I was in 3rd grade, by the way. This is such a comic book. It's a book, and it has comics, and there's Sunday comics, and so that's a comic book. See? Yeah. And so then he started looking at it, and he was just, you read this? Yeah. And so he started looking at it, and he goes, I'm not saying that this is interesting. You're into this? That's one of them. You should really look at the Sunday comics. And he just kind of looked through it, and he's like, you are such a dork. Who knew you were such a dork? I did. I knew I'm a dork. I did. I'm a total dork. I know I am. Why, is that a bad thing? What's wrong with dorks? And so then I had to ask my big blood brother what was wrong with dorks. Which then that went the way that did, because that was as it was. And so yeah. So I wasn't a nerd, I was a dork. Still kinda am. And like massively huge dork. So yeah. And then later I made attempts to explain Sailor Moon. And that's a whole different type of dork. And so, though, take into context, this is the year 2022. That was back in the early 1990s. So, back then, when it was just coming out, it was like, oh, you're such a dork. Not the way he said it, though, kind of the... It's like, I am a dork, but I'm not a dork. But I'm kind of a dork, but not that type of a dork. I'm a dork, though. But not that dorky. And yet, kind of. And so... Nonetheless, that's the situation. So I made attempts to explain this later, which is an irony, because I dated a guy from Ohio who didn't seem to understand, nor did he even have the capacity to believe, because he actually believed the words that came from my biological father and my biological mother in comparison to the truth from me. And so then there were those factors because, you know, whatever his personal experiences were. And so, so nonetheless, there's two different types of maps, pun intended, regarding initials. And then the irony of irony on top of that, in 8th grade, for those who know what science teacher regarding, I can't remember which level, as to when you had to make the, so it was the egg drop. Not egg drop soup, although, you know, I am half Chinese. I'm just saying, technically though, those who did not have their eggs survive, it kind of was, in a different capacity. It's a total, I'm this dork, and so I am half Chinese, so, and grandma and grandpa Gavitt, you know, then there's Buk Gung and Buk Poo, so, you know, Cantonese and Mandarin. And so I guess, does that make, okay, so here, let me be complete dork for a second. Let me be total dork. So, my Buk Gung being first, you know, being the Cantonese, and then my Buk Poo being half Cantonese and half Mandarin, though I'm only half Chinese, though then there's that as far as arithmetic, so then does that make me half, but 3/4 Cantonese and 1/4 Mandarin, but half, and then there's that arithmetic. So, nonetheless, so then there's that, nonetheless, so there's the for those who remember, I know he was like 6 foot something, dark hair, and he had broader shoulders. I don't remember his name though. And I got in trouble because that teacher took the maps that my biological father had allowed me to use for the wetlands report, which I dealt with at the house because of that individual. After that, because of that sexist machismo douchebag, in my opinion, after his douchebaggery as to the egg drop and the maps, as far as that's concerned, that, yeah, I think that's, I was already dealing with at that time. Yeah, because then there was also the carpentry teacher, and I broke his record. So, you know, then there's that, and then there were the techie guys, and I knew more about technology, and so then there's that, and then my biological mother worked in information technology, software engineering, and they thought that they knew something because they played video games compared to coding, and so then there was that. Nonetheless, that egg drop, not egg drop soup, because I didn't make egg drop soup. Because both times when I had made my project for the egg drop, the first one was a soccer ball size, and I had put a whole bunch of popcorn around the egg and a whole bunch of newspaper. He didn't say it was only scotch tape that was supposed to be used. He said tape, so I used packing tape. And so I could have used duct tape, but I used packing tape instead. And so, you know, still did the egg drop. I had a little parachute with it too. And it landed, and so it didn't really matter as to whether or not, but it was one of those, I don't care, let me test my theory. Let's play, especially in the 1990s, those who know hacky sacks. And there were a few that played soccer. So we were just, while others were doing their egg drops, we were actually playing soccer with what I had created. And then when it came time to open it up, that same douchebag, in my opinion, teacher who had cost me a lot of situations at my biological mother and biological father's house. Yeah, that son of a bitch. Nonetheless, in my opinion, that situation regarding those wetland maps, and the maps as to the area, because it was in paper in comparison to digitized. So then those particular, that's important. Paper's important. And so that douchebag who caused us a whole bunch of stuff. Anyway, so when we opened up to see whether or not mine was done last, because mine, and I had to redo it in the next 24 hours, so I did, and I made a teardrop shape with cardboard, and like did the exact same thing, only bigger. And so yeah, instead of it being this big, it went to this big, and this big in comparison to this big. Yeah, you want to talk about a double bird on that one. As far as that son of a... Anyway, I didn't have it. I have 10 fingers, and I pretty much could do a different type of spirit fingers regarding that particular individual, in my opinion, nonetheless. I don't even have to actually do it. It's as simple as as many people say, I know how people are from New Jersey. Well, I was born and raised in New Jersey, so that. And so, Fort Dix, and so, Fort Monmouth, and so, and so, as far as that's concerned, and and then there's pieces of wood which have different grains that kind of look like fingers. So there's that as far as my opinion regarding that. I'm not saying I'm still angry that I dealt with a lot of stuff because of that. What I am saying is I'm a smidgen bitter about it because of what I dealt with because of that. And I have every right to be, because I shouldn't have ever been blamed for what I did not do. That's the same thing. As far as that's concerned, I have every right to that. And unless somebody has a reason for me that would not be legitimate to anger, don't think so. And so that, it went from this size. So when it was opened up, my egg was still there, whole, perfectly whole. And so then, of course, that whatever, and then checked to see if it had vinegar. It didn't have any vinegar at all. And then smashed it as per whatever to actually check. And it was like, that's right. That's right. I'm that good. I'm that amazing. What? And then I still had to redo it over. So then I redid it over. And then I was like, that's right. That's right. I went from this size to this size. What? And so you total dorkness and stuff like that. But then it was actually funny because all of the people in that particular biology class, I think it was biology, they were enraged with that teacher because every one of them took up and were like, what do you mean? We played soccer with this, and like some of the guys were like, we did this, we did that, da 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 da. And so that teacher was, as he was, well, the following year when I was at St. John Vianney High School, my teacher I think it was my biology teacher, she and I were talking, and I had explained this project, and she was like, oh, I know that guy, he did this. And you know what? Don't worry. I know some people. What does that mean? No. we've had an issue with that one before because he has an issue accepting that females are actually capable. So we're going to take care of that. Okay. Yeah, no. He's not the only one that needs to be educated as far as how that is. So don't you worry. You just keep, doing your thing. We're going to take care of that because that is just, we'll take care of that. Don't worry. You can get angry. You can be upset. We can't tell you certain things. Don't worry though. Except I naturally do. I kind of can't help it. If you do what I dealt with, it's not a good thing to tell me that. That's a really bad thing. I know some people say no news is good news. And then there's, if you ever have met my biological mother and or my biological father, that's not necessarily the same at all. So if you actually let me know, then I can be calm. But if I don't have certain things, then I don't have that. I don't have that. That's not natural to me at all. Like I'm not with my childhood, no, this far. And that was in 1995. That was in that was 1996. That was before I had injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. And so, yeah. So it just, I probably haven't really changed all that much. I was told by someone I had known from gymnastics when in Houston in the year 2013 at the NRA gun show where Arlie Ermy was. And at one point she said, you're like exactly the same person, though there are certain things about you that were almost like it's not ever there. And then the other things about you are so much more boisterous compared to before your head injury. And I was like, what is that supposed to mean? And she's like, well, for example, you were kind of protective before your head injury. You were a bit about justice before. And now, after how you let those Houston police officers get to spend time with Arlie Ermy, and you looked not only at her and her husband, but also the other people. So those at Geek Squad, so I was at the NRA gun show. And so in comparison to at Geek Squad, where after the people that were as they were went the way they did, I was like, you take, it's fine, go ahead, take a few minutes. And then like the guys behind would be like, Texas guys, and they, right, I said no. You're gonna take a step back sort of situation. So at the NRA gun show, at the Glock stand with Arlie Ermy. So when I was asked, I was like, yeah, no, that's fine. Let them, they can have some time. That's fine. And so then, there was some yipping in the back, and it was, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's nice. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Don't make me get all New Jersey on you. Don't make me. Because this is a gun show. Don't make me get all New Jersey on you, because I have a reference and you definitely don't want that up in this area. I promise you. Because don't make me. don't make me go there, because if I have to, I can. I've done it before. Don't make me. I bought gun safes for different types because my children's biological father, my now dead ex-husband, had a ridiculous amount of firearms. And he didn't see anything wrong with, toddlers being in an area where they could toddle into an area that would have firearms and they were all loaded. And so after dealing with a few conversations and taking my stand, and then I told him I'd go New Jersey gun laws on the gun safes if I had to. So all he had to do was get one. All he had to do was get one gun safe and put all the firearms in there. That's all he had to do. So whenever I finally remembered, I went, so New Jersey gun laws. I got a gun safe that was the Gamma 3 regarding by the bed, as far as it's a cherry mahogany wood, and it looked like an old style radio. It had a little doo-doo-doo. And so I said, put the program for 1776, because I can remember that, mainly because of General George Washington. And so 1776, ooh, whole kit and caboodle there. And then there was a firearm safe that I purchased that was just for the pistols, and then a safe just the regular pistols, and then the black powder pistols, and then the black powder rifles had their own gun safe, and then regular rifles had their own gun safe, and then shotguns had their own gun safe, because it was if I have to go New Jersey gun laws, I will go New Jersey gun laws. And so don't make me go New Jersey gun laws. I'll tell you, don't know. People who say they know who, and I dealt with that, because I dealt with that. I will go so New Jersey gun laws. Don't make me go there, because I'll go New Jersey gun laws. You don't know New Jersey gun laws. You don't want none of that. I promise you, you want that Second Amendment. All you gotta do is just have one firearm safe, and it's awesome. Otherwise, don't make me, because I know how to go New Jersey gun laws on you. You don't know. And so, what was not understood is he had not understood who my biological mother was. For those who have not met her, so there's a reference to, I think, in South Park, Kyle's mom, as far as that's concerned. For that reference of like PTA type. Yeah, that's that. Yes, with the area of New Jersey. Yeah. So I said, don't make me go New Jersey gun laws. And so after the pistol safe, the black powder pistol safe, the black powder rifle safe, the regular rifle safe, then the shotgun safe, then I got gun locks. Because you want me, I will go New Jersey gun laws. You say you know how people are from New Jersey. I don't believe you. So then I not only got gun locks, they were keyed differently. They didn't all have the same key. And I made him go and figure out how to, that's not my fault how he had done that's his fault. However, if he didn't label the gun lock, because I don't know if he knew. I know I told him, if he didn't believe that they were all keyed differently, that's his fault for not paying attention, which his brother would know. So then I had a gun safe for the keys per gun lock. Then I got a gun safe for the ammunition. And so, you know, I am a Virgo, okay? So, for those who don't know how CDO Virgos can be, I'm a smidgen little bit more CDO-y-ish because I literally organized alphabetically OCD. So I CDO'd New Jersey gun law safes in that reference, and then because, you know, then because I got a BB gun, so I can tell about this, okay? So I didn't know anything about Texas at all, whatsoever, at any point in time before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, okay? And so one Christmas, you know, anybody who's heard of Black Friday sales, I see the only thing I know about the price of firearms, in my defense, okay, which I suppose is an irony, my defense, the only firearm price I know is in reference to a baby Desert Eagle. And so this baby Desert Eagle cost something like $1,200, which I thought there could have been a better deal for a baby Desert Eagle. I mean, the 50 cal, please. Whatever. I'm not saying I know anything about firearms. What I am saying is I don't understand how a baby Desert Eagle cost $1,200. However, you know, and it wasn't the 50 cal, because I would think, but whatever, fine. Whatever it is, fine. So then I look in the, what was it? I think it was Academy. I think that's what it was, Academy. And it said a BB gun, Red Wagon, Red Rider, something, whatever. It was $19.95. I can make fun of myself. So in my thoughts, this is probably that cognitive disorder, hypothetically. So in my thoughts, I'm like, wow, $1,200 for a little? A baby Desert Eagle. A BB gun is bigger. That must be an awesome deal. So because of my minimal, like not even minimal, I have at that point in time maybe 3 years of knowing about what Black Friday sales are. So I'm all like, wow, that would totally be an amazing deal. Like, I better get there early because this is the Far Side comic situation in the Second Amendment way. Here's the comic book, it's Sunday comics, so, you know. So I'm all like, I have to be total ninja and like not say I have to be total ninja. And I'm in San Antonio, Texas, no less. So I'm like, yes, I'm gonna totally, like, there's gonna be so, like, as many, like, I heard people are into Second Amendment stuff in the state of Texas. So like, oh, I better get there early because this is like, that's like such a great deal. That's like, it's Black Friday. I'm like, wow, I'm gonna have the best. So awesome, so awesome. I obviously had only the New Jersey gun law understanding. And so, you know, I'm all like, I'll be back, go Black Friday shopping, and I go to Academy because, you know, in my thoughts. it's gonna be a line of people. So my only prior experience of the in-person, face-to-face in person is like Kohl's for that stuff. Like, and then, you know, some Walmart stuff and all that. So I'm like, oh, Academy? Like, people are into outside stuff in the state of Texas. So in my thoughts, I am freaking out because I'm gonna do this by myself. I'm gonna go to a store that I haven't ever been to before. And it's gonna be for a firearm. In my thoughts, okay, because I don't know what it, and then, you know, for a while, I know that I had a BB gun situation before my head injury, but I didn't remember anything about that other than what I did remember. I guess this is the memory deficits. It took a while for that to come forward, is I made it strong. Like, I turned the BB gun upside down and like I had pumped it like 30, 40 times and then like, I'm gonna make you go. And so, like, you know, when you line up the shot and then the paper actually moves because of the sound. And so I'm just, so I don't remember, and it doesn't look the same from what I remembered. And so, and I did remember my Target paper, like in comparison to like a little, like the paper was blown out on the other side where the corners were like this. And it's like, yes, that's right, I'm so amazing when it comes to shots. Sort of, you know. But that was before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. This was, I think, the year of, I don't know what year. I don't remember what year it was, to be honest. And so I know it happened though. I think it might have been 2005. I think it might have been 2005 actually. And so I'm a whole 5 years awake from my coma. Still got, in my defense, I still have the subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain in my defense, okay? For those of you who know about firearms, especially Military City, USA, and anybody who's into firearms, that's, you know, at all. And so and so in my defense, the only price I know is $1,200 for a baby Desert Eagle, and I'm surprised as to the 50 cal, but this is a bigger firearm because I looked at the picture. And so in comparison to the pistols that were bigger in the picture, and whatever as far as that compared to the BB gun. So I think it was a Red Ryder, I think that's what it was, and I'm all, I totally, have to, and then because I have the Fort Worth experience, because it wasn't San Antonio regarding Black Friday, so it's Fort Worth, Texas, regarding Black Friday sales that I had been to, so that's a different level. So I am completely planning, and I'm gonna be ready, I'm gonna totally get, and so then I get there to Academy thinking that there's gonna be all sorts of people that, and in my defense, anybody who's ever paid a lot of money for a firearm, and so I'm all like, yeah. And then there's not that many cars in the parking lot. What happened? And so then, I go to the doors. I thought that people got dropped off, because I have my ex-mother-in-law and my ex-sister-in-law for this what's going on? What happened? Okay, so I'm thinking like everybody's in some other special area. That's what I'm thinking. It's like, I can't be this stupid. I mean, I could be. I know I can be this stupid. I know I can. So I go and it's like, I don't hear anything. Huh. Damn. And so in my thoughts, it's, well, that just means some, excuse me, where do I go for this to that way? Because in my thoughts, it's, well, I don't need to see any of that. I need to get to the safe area, pun intended, you know, so let me get to the firearm location, because, you know. And so I'm this much of a dork. I am. And so go out to the area and the guy's like, so what are you looking for? And I'm like, I'm totally gonna get an awesome deal. And the guy's like, well, you know, it's Black Friday, blah, blah, blah. And I'm walking with the guy and he's like over here, like, yeah, so I'm gonna do this. And I can't believe you have such a good deal. And he's like, oh yeah, you know, because Academy, whatever, da 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 da. I'm like, yeah. So, okay, cool. And so I see the case. I see the case. You know, all the cases. It's like, oh, how you doing? My thoughts like, Look at you. Look at you are just a little, I like you. And so this is thoughts at this time, by the way. So I am thinking and looking at these firearms and just like, how you doing, pretty? So shit. How you doing? I could take you and shoot you any day of the week, you know. I will load that magazine with so much care. You don't know. I'll put each individual bullet in with concern, because yes. Yeah, you too. Look at that grip. Bet you feel perfect. This guy is looking at me and he's like, may I help you find whichever one you're looking for? Can you hear my thoughts? And he was like, no, I do. And so I don't know where he had been, that may have been a similarity. I can think of stuff now in 2022 compared to then. And so I'm just, I do know I did do that a few times where I was like, and then in my thoughts, it was like, and then I can just, I'll get a soft claw. And I'll just make sure that you're taken care of. I'll get a perfect claw. Just, and then when I'll be gentle, unless I have to be rough, you know, because sometimes when it's, you know, it's okay. It's okay. So these are internal thoughts. Well, I'm looking at this case full of firearms and it's like, oh, look at you. I bet you'd fit just either side. Yeah. Should just be, look like you need a special holster. Yes, you do, don't you? You need a special holster, not just any holster. You need a special one, don't you? Yet the only audible stuff this guy hears in Academy, when mind you, I don't have my hair this way. I have my natural hair color, and my hair is about to here maybe. It's dark brown, like longer dark brown hair and stuff. And I didn't have my tattoos yet, and it's just like, all this guy hears is, And so he's just kind of, so what can I help you find? He did hear me say that, by the way. Maybe later what? I was just looking at the pretties. These are just, I could get them little trinkets called bullets. That's what I could do. Now, I know that I've brought up the supposed to be consenting adult lifestyle. I'm not talking about that type of bullet, by the way. Although the irony, it is shiny. And so, nonetheless, so this guy, he's like, okay, so what are you looking for? He's still blind. Your BB guns. And the guy goes, what? After, yeah. It's not for me. And he just looks. So are you gonna get anything for? Not right now. These. One day, they will be mine. Right now, I have to get a BB gun. Oh, okay. So then, complete mood change. He's like, oh, well, I guess I didn't need to walk over to this case to show you these. Why? Don't apologize. They needed attention. It's okay. So then we go over to this aisle, and I see, what is this? And he goes, well, this is what you're talking about. And so, again, in my thoughts, I literally just see the price tags along with these firearms. And so, I'm thinking, what? And then the irony, I see the jars of BBs, and it's like, well, that's about my thoughts right now. That is definitely, this is like the equivalent of my thoughts from what I just, and then, why are these here? Why? Do you know what can happen with a BB gun? It's got the word gun in it. I can just envision like hunters, though mainly military and law enforcement guys and firearm enthusiasts being like, just as, and then, so anyway, so I just, excuse me, what is this? Like, it's even on the low part of the shelf, like, what happens if children go running around Because again, I literally just took care of a couple little bit ago, the firearm safe. So what is gonna happen? What is this? Do you know what could happen with a... Do you know what could happen? Guys, like, you were just... They are in gun safe. Okay, stuff. It's just right there. What did you do? And so then, because my biological father went to the school of Bolivar and had jewelry stuff, so then it's like, and because I only saw the price tags, and so I only have the knowledge, okay, so I acknowledge this is cognitive disorder and memory deficits, hypothetically. Do you know how valuable firearms are? Literally, you have them. So again, my thoughts are these small firearms are not as expensive as the bigger ones. And so, because size and stuff, don't say size doesn't matter when it comes to any capacity of. What is this? What is this? Well, it's a Red Ryder BB gun. Again, I see the cans full of BBs and I'm just so symbolic right now. Wait, no, this was 2003. My mistake, this is 2003. Okay, so even less. I have 2 Black Fridays that I've ever been to, and they're in Fort Worth. This is the year 2003. I apologize. So, and the irony, my biological mother and my biological father with my biological sister had just moved to the state of Texas. And so, what happens if somebody and the common sense. Well, we'll probably see them if they try to walk out with that. You know, you make sense on that as to why those smaller ones are in a case. That makes sense. Okay. I'll give you that. What is there? And so he gets to the point where he's like, you're not from or let me do this quickly. You're not from Texas, are you? Thought you was a moment ago. And then he's having a problem with a baby gun. I'm not having a problem with it. I just need to understand why this is out in the open in comparison, but you made it make sense. Okay, fine. So, I explained the whole thing as far as, he goes, may I go get some people so you can tell them that? Yeah, it's fine. I'll just deal with looking at this. I don't even know what is in front of me right now. I'm sure others could have said that in regards of beforehand. Anyway, so then, I'm just, I can't believe, look at this. And so in my thoughts, it's like, wow. I want to go look at the pretties. But right now, I don't know if I'm supposed to be angry or go see the pretty, I'm so but that's fine. And so these brings some people and I explain it over and over again several times. It's like, it's fine. I can make fun of myself. I'm pretty good at it. and I'm gonna get better at making fun of myself, so it's okay. So then I still have no knowledge, okay? So I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, I could buy all of these BB guns. Such a deal! $19.95. Again, baby Desert Eagle thoughts. So $1,200, and I'm not telling this guy, like, and so like, okay, I won't be greedy. I won't be greedy. I'll just get one Red Ryder BB gun for $19.95. So then, you know, I get that, and then I get the whatever doohickey mabob of BBs, because it's like, well, you know, it's kind of weird. I'm so completely just, I don't even know what to think. I'm literally walking around completely dazed, so confused by this whole, it's like, what is going on? I'm so, what do I do with this, man? What's going on? So but then I'm like, okay, I still got a good deal. Walk by the case of, you know, and so, but it is as it is. Okay, so get there, pay for everything, and then, you know, I see $25.99, and then the change of stuff like that, and so I'm like, wow, I am amazing. I don't know, and so again, I'm thinking, do I go back and like, but it says limited number, you know, it's like, you know what, don't be greedy. Don't be greedy, it's okay. But I don't see $25.99. I only see 2500 or 259er. I don't see the dot. Okay, so in my thoughts, whoa, I totally got even better of a deal. Psh, I'm so like, wow. So, you know, the irony of what normal males usually think of when it comes to a female in regards to certain things in comparison. Instead, again, in my defense, my only knowledge is $1,200 for a baby Desert Eagle, all that sort of stuff. Okay. Military C USA. Overall 410 and 151, by the way. That one. And so, so happy I got such a good deal. So then I get back to my house, San Antonio. I look at the circular, and then I see the dot. Son of a, and so that I refuse to acknowledge that I have memory deficits or cognitive disorders. I refuse to, but I'm enraged. Mother son of a bitch, and I'm pissed. So I have in comparison to the comic book of the Far Side. And so, well, I suppose I can make a joke in that reference because that is far from the side of knowledge, probably for any person who knows anything about firearms compared to myself. And so I walk in, and my now dead ex-husband, now whatever it is, he's like, what's going on? Fucking Christmas, these are fucking whatever. And he's just, what the fuck is wrong with you? I don't even want to talk about it. I obviously, thankfully, don't have to get another gun safe. I obviously don't have to do that. I'm gonna go outside, have a cigarette. Okay, you want to? No, I don't need to. I'm so angry. Okay. Why are you angry? Because. And so then I go explain it, and he was just. I was angry at you before about the gun safes. Now? Well, why don't you go outside and have a cigarette? I'm gonna go do that. I'm so... Yup. Yeah, so... So then I just kind of was a little angry. I totally went through half a pack, if not 3/4 of a pack of cigarettes, because I was that angry. At myself. At myself, I was this angry. It's just, I can't believe that I'm so dumb. It should, and I have my saying. I think I can't believe that this is like, no, like, and so in my thoughts, I'm so mad. I am chewing myself out. It's a dot. Like, what? And so angry at myself. Because I have been refusing to accept certain things about myself. And so... Though internal thoughts in comparison. So like, if in that comic book reference, there was like a little bubble, you know, or comic, Sunday comic, I don't know if comic books are the same. So like little thought bubble. And so comparison. So, you know, I got so angry, everything turned white. And I know there have to be those who understand this. Like, you get so enraged at yourself that you just see white. Like, you don't even see, like, everything is blurry. It's there, but it's just pure white. And so I don't even really see my backyard at that point. I know I'm in my backyard. I know I'm on my patio, sitting in my chair, and I'm just, I can't believe I'm so, and so I can't and so, like, I'm just so angry at myself because I just had to see a little dot. That's it. In my defense, you know how circulars are for the newspaper, if you have gotten those. So I'm very angry with myself. And it is what it is. So I told some people in scuba diving about this, and some of the guys were like, you did what? And I'm like, yeah, I can make fun of myself because, well, what else can you do? And some of the guys were like, well, what do you mean? And this is the same in the supposed to be consenting adult lifestyle community. Both sides were like, I guess it's funny right now. So, symbolic portions. Well, what could you do? Well, I can laugh at myself. And they were like, well, is there something else you could do? Well, if you can laugh at yourself, you pretty much can laugh at anybody else. Yeah, that's kind of how that goes. Yeah, because in order to appreciate humor in some ways, you gotta have that. And so, I in that reference as to because I obviously didn't buy a firearm when I was a child. Fairly certain. I don't think that would be allowed in New Jersey. I'm fairly same thing, in Illinois, either as a teenager, duh. And so, it is as it is. I am Second Amendment friendly, though, this is, I acknowledge myself in this reference. So, like, knowing how to shoot a firearm, knowing how to maintain a firearm, since, I couldn't figure out the dot, making sure you actually get that correctly. Honest with, the facts of, and so, because, common sense can be a superpower sometimes. And so, such as seeing the dot in between the $25.99 in comparison to thinking, $2,599, because that was my thoughts. And so, because my only knowledge was the 1,200, so that was. And so, so I can tattletale on myself pretty easily. Yeah, I learned later there's this thing called the Fifth Amendment. I may have learned this before my head injury. If I did, well, I probably forgot it. And I don't remember the full thing about it. So then there's that. So, yeah. Yay. So then, the following year was my backyard, because I need to go on a vision quest. What am I ever going to be good enough to do? Ever at all with my existence? Because I am so, because there's the saying where we are our own worst critic. So in my thoughts, I'm going, how could I be so stupid? I can't believe it took me so long to figure out there's a dot in this capacity. Like, what is wrong with me? I need to do a vision quest, because what am I gonna do with my life? Is there any value to my existence? What is the meaning of life? What do I do? And then there's the oak leaf situation a few other times, and it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So then I started telling people, and I had forgotten how things were when I was a child and a teenager, making attempts to say anything. So I ran around San Antonio, Texas, military city, USA. Yeah, no, I had no, just think about this. So 2004, okay, I did my head injury. I'm awake from my coma for 4 years. Still got the subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain. I'm involved with the pagan community, and then, you know, perception, okay? And then the Excalibur fair problem, and I've already had this vision quest in comparison to the reality that, and the oak leaf situation actually did occur just as similarly as the Excalibur fair situation and all that. And so, you know, Irving and Indiana and all that, but I didn't remember from my childhood when it came to that. So, okay, fine, it's 2022 compared to 2004. That's a little bit of a deficit of time to, so okay, sure, there's my memory deficit and it's just 2004 to 2022 to remember my childhood, how people were regarding that, and then what movies that I didn't get to see, and, you know, comic book differences. And then, you know, the oceanic stuff. And so then by the time of 2009, I am, you know, this equivalent regarding speaking, because it's like, I'm not saying a thing. I have already dealt with these scuba divers who are like, yeah, it's 115 feet to the deck or the tower of the Oriskany. And then all these other factors, so yeah. And then, you know, because of the situations with my son and my daughter in 2009, well, their biological father died in January of 2008, and their grandpa had died Grandpa Nichols had died in August of 2008. So I can't allow myself to go in depth, pun intended. This is why, if any civilian recreational scuba divers and or military scuba divers and or law enforcement scuba divers, there was one person, and one person only, to ask. Still is only one person to ask, and that one person is me. It's always been that way. So, yeah, I've done some updating regarding my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, and that's on my website, www.susanmeling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. And so I realize now, it took 22 years from waking up from my coma. Almost, maybe. I don't know if I woke up yet by this month. As far as that's concerned, I don't know if I was awake yet from my coma after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. Nonetheless, so I can make fun of myself. Nonetheless, so there's that. And so I can acknowledge I might have a little bit of a memory deficit. Smidgen of a cognitive disorder, possibly. Though in those time frames, I also, the headache pain. I mean, from 2000 through 2009, the headache pain. I mean, anybody who deals with daily headaches, you know, yeah, this is 22-ish years later. Okay, well, I've had to figure ways to deal with that or cope with that. And then there's the migraines, as they are in different ways. And so it's been 22 or going on 22 years of dealing with this in comparison. And so, and then there's words, because of, you know, a dot, you know, it's kind of important. And so there's also that. And so I've done a lot of stuff making attempts to figure out how to deal with it. In comparison, or I shouldn't say deal with it partially, but also handle the situations as best as I can for myself in comparison. And so, but when it came to my scuba diving, well, I didn't really go into that because I had already made attempts. And with what I was dealing with, especially between being a mom of 2 children that were in elementary school at that time, in a new city in that area, looking as I do, the situations of, it's a smaller town. I already dealt with what I dealt with in San Antonio that has a larger population in comparison, all these other factors, and in comparison of any, common sense from anybody else, to just ask me in honesty, it was as it was. And I suppose in certain references regarding not just what's supposed to be considered the adult consenting lifestyle, which again, consent requires consulting to actually be informed, like everybody, which would include myself, would require being officially informed in comparison to assuming in that reference. Because assuming is not etiquette. Assumptions are not respect at all. And so in regards of, let's say, regarding the modern day book section on my website, www.susaneeling.com, say people that I may have once known showed up to Washington State and thought whatever they thought in comparison, because I had already dealt with what I dealt with in the state of Texas regarding that. And so while some people may have thought that it wasn't that big of a deal and or didn't believe it was that big of a deal as far as those situations were concerned, not just in reference to my scuba diving, but also in reference to my headaches and migraines and memory deficits and cognitive disorders and issues with technology and so on and so forth. Having went from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to 2nd grade math, after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000 in basic training, well, I'm gonna guesstimate at this point that might be enough to actually show, though it also, if you were to take in reference, especially from the time frame of 2020, well, you could, or I should even say 2019, well, that's the amount of work I made attempts in whichever situation. So as you can look through my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, the reason why so many of my journal blogs co-align and co-mingle regarding or interconnected is because I wasn't taking care of just one situation at a time. I had to make sure that my son and my daughter were taken care of as best as I could. I had to take care of the after effects from my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, as well as the situations regarding my scuba diving. I didn't have anybody in person, face-to-face in person, that actually assisted me. I had volunteered in multiple locations. There wasn't anybody in person, face-to-face in person, that had done so in those references. All these other factors. Take it in every situation I was dealing with on my own, while dealing with the entirety of the groups of individuals that I had once known in person, face-to-face in person, with their assumptions as to whatever they thought. And then all these other factors instead. And I warned people, if I ever wound up above the Mason-Dixon line, and it wasn't in New Jersey, you better remember, never forget, always remember, if I wind up above the Mason-Dixon line and it's not in New Jersey, you got a major problem on your hands. And a bunch of people throughout the lifestyle, what's supposed to be consenting adult lifestyle, all of them, oh, sure. They claimed it was attention seeking. That's what they claimed. The truth of the matter is the truth. My name is Susan. My name isn't Mike. My name is Susan. My name isn't Anna. My name is Susan. My name is not Patricia. My name is Susan, and granted, while one of my ex-sisters-in-law, she goes by Susie in comparison, I go by Susan. Susan Mealing, to be most specific. So then there's those factors to take in consideration. So why would I believe in justice? What is there for me to believe? So, in those references, but then again, why would I ever believe that I ever had any real friends when in that hypothetical? Why would I believe I ever had any real, even relationships? If that's the case, why would I ever believe that? Of whatever capacity, whether it would be a real acquaintance, because that would require genuinity and truth, or a real friendship, because that would require genuinity and truth. And again, a real in regards to whether romantic, dating, however you want to word it, it'd have to be in truth. Genuinely. Especially with the after effects of my head injury. So, while some may have thought whatever they may have thought, well, maybe that's enough proof. So today is the 4th of June. The year 2022, and so I've made a lot of attempts to actually. So if any of the references as to, for the example as to, because Florida, right, scuba diving, and you know, certain types of possibilities in reference to what they call recreational scuba diving or lazy scuba diving in the civilian sector. Well, if they ever complained about the fact I earned 26 scuba diving certifications, I don't know if anyone would actually be proud of that. However, I mean, that is as it is. I'm proud, not in a prideful way, I'm proud of the fact that because of being in the United States of America, that has been a capability of mine, being a biological female, looking as I do, despite those situations. But that shouldn't be a problem, especially in reference to the after effects. So while I've had individuals in both the scuba diving civilian sector as well as in what's supposed to be considered the consenting adult lifestyle, having had the nerve to actually complain to me about my hair, having had the nerve to complain to me about my tattoos, as though it would ever matter in comparison as far as their opinion. And not one or two people, there are the references, I would guesstimate, Leatherati and FetLife, and possibly even Facebook, as to different, whether posts and the full aspects, and or whatever discussions regarding messaging, phone calls, emails, whatever. And so instead of the common sense as to that reality? Well, the nerve to complain and the irony in comparison. So my colors, black and white. And so with my journal blog, the ornery PSA, as far as the updates, whatever accuracy as to the clarifications and verifications in conjunction. So whatever possibilities as to what I personally didn't remember in any capacity of. I've had a lot in my background that my biological mother and or my biological father, first and foremost, didn't ever have a right to. Doesn't matter what they thought. They haven't ever had a right to it. Secondly, nor did my biological little sister. She didn't have a right to it. None of them, not even my ex-in-laws or any of them, have ever had a right to it. None of their connected portions, they have not ever had the rights that they thought they had. They didn't have that Freedom of Information Act in any capacity regarding myself. They didn't have that right. They still don't have that right. That's a fact. So while they may have thought whatever they may have thought, if in any capacity they actually knew that they didn't have that FOIA right, then there's the capacity of how accurate would it be in regards of active duty and or National Guard and or reservist and or veteran and or dependent in regards of. Because unlike what some people have done regarding the law enforcement, where they think that because they pay taxes, that gives them a right that they don't have. Well, in regards of active duty, National Guard, reservists, and dependents, the individuals that pay taxes, they don't have any rights to them at all because of the fact that there's the articles regarding the UCMJ. And so any injuries and or damages that incur during active duty National Guard reservist as to the veteran status or medically retired in regards of because of identification card situations as to combinations and differences, well, those taxes, they don't have the right to complain about stipends because of the facts that they're paying for, the fact that they have had the luxury to not go through whatever work to keep the land of the United States of America and treated aspects safe. So any damages incurred are what those people pay via taxes and the stipends of are, along with the health care in those references, because it's similar to other situations. So no matter what some people might think regarding their taxes, they actually don't have the rights that certain, especially civilians, have thought, because that's not a right that they have. The individuals that have, doesn't matter whether or not they had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000 during basic training or one when they were overseas, the damages are still the damages, and that's what your taxes go to take care of because of the facts. If individuals made the choice because they have had the luxury to not have a mandatory military service in the capacity that Israel has, then they don't have a right to complain, because
I dealt with my biological mother and my biological father having had the nerve to try to complain about my stipend. They didn't pay attention to the facts. So that aspect is in reference to because of the after effects from my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, that temporary retirement duty leave that became medical retirement, that's the facts. So they haven't had any rights to ever involve themselves with any situation of. And if they had done some undercover covert, we're gonna totally be tattletale Democrats. Okay, there's the proof. But that also in turn proves what I dealt with as a child and as a teenager, that I told people what I was dealing with. Which would be why it would be so easy as to how those people were and are in that hypothetical. So, and as far as that abomination in reference to what my biological little sister had, the abomination of a wedding, as far as that horror of abominations, in my opinion, well, that's her connected aspects, not mine. I didn't ever agree to. My biological mother and biological father didn't have any legal rights to ever make a deal on my behalf, ever. Not at all. So if they made a deal after I already had been in the Army and as the one and only sponsor, my biological mother and my biological father and my biological little sister, well, they don't have any rights to my son or my daughter either, because they are my dependents. And so those updates regarding my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, through my website, www.susanmealing.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com, any accuracy, especially with those clarifications and verifications. So I wonder if there's a certain accuracy to my colors as a pre-viewpoint, the year 2004. So did anybody actually remember correctly? And then, what is to actually fix and repair correctly as to what occurred? Because if the wishful thoughts as to after I woke up from my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, no, not at all. Not in the slightest. So while that might be wishful, well, that's exactly what it is. Wishful. That doesn't make up for it, because it's after the time frame I was active duty. It's after the time of being on temporary retirement duty leave. That's after. So even if there were situations while I was active duty and or temporary retirement duty leave, it doesn't change the facts of the time frame after the year of the year and after the year of 2004. So each and every needless problem that occurred to myself and or my son and or my daughter, those people legally, morally, ethically, though most importantly, legally, are officially responsible for. Because legally, I am the one and only sponsor. And so anything and everything that occurred thereafter in any connection of any capacity and every capacity, that would be the legal standing. So, if in that hypothetical, as to my accuracy and proven clarifications and verifications, no matter how inconvenient that truth might be, it's still the truth, and that's important. So, go look through my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmeling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. Read through those really important details for those updates from 2019 through currently and onward. And make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel so that way you can be notified if it takes me a little while to post it on my website regarding my official YouTube channel. Go to my website, look through the book section to get the links to purchase my books through Amazon on my website, www.susanmeling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. And make sure, if you can, with the clarifications and verifications, if you know a law enforcement official or area or elected official that would be capable to assist in those legal situations that would be required for justice for me and justice for my family, which would be my son and my daughter and I. Although yes, there are those who obviously needlessly would have been impacted because of the hypotheticals as to whatever proof. So, please do so, though remember, first and foremost. So, if you have a comment, please make sure to have etiquette and respect. Like my official YouTube videos, share the links to my official YouTube videos, and the links to my journal blog entries. I figured in that similarity that it would be common sense, but I don't want to assume. Thanks for tuning in. Today is the 4th of June, 2022. Thank you in advance. The 4th of June, 2022.